In order to describe our body position and direction, scientists came up with different terms we need to be familiar with. You already saw some of these terms, but now we are officially introducing them. Our body can be divided through three different body planes: mid sagittal, frontal, and transverse. The mid sagittal, like here in the green, okay, this divides the body into left and right. Left and right is happening through the mid sagittal plane. Then we have the frontal plane, which is in blue. The frontal plane divides our body to front and back. The third one is the transverse plane, which splits our body into up and down. So these are the three different planes. 1, 2, 3. One is separating it, the mid sagittal, to left and right, the frontal into front and back, and the transverse into up and down. And these terms, you are going to see them if you are going to work with, for example, with the claims of the insurance, or what was it called? I forgot. The coding, medical coding, okay? Because usually the reports are written in this language, and they are going to use these terms to describe what they have done. Along with that, we have other terms that we are going to use to describe relative positions. We have anterior, posterior, proximal, distal, superior, and inferior. And these are coming from these planes. So anterior is at the front, posterior at the back, proximal near to the body trunk, distal far from the body trunk, superior is above, toward the above, and inferior is toward down. So for example, I will clear everything here. With the frontal plane, when it's cutting it like this, so this side is the anterior, and this side is the posterior. Then we have, with the transverse plane, this side is the superior, and this side is the inferior. Then, for example, the elbow, this, since it's close to the trunk of the body, this is proximal. The hand is distal because it's away from the trunk of the body, and so on. These are the terms that we are going to use to describe the body position. Now, another concept in our body is something known as the homeostasis. And homeostasis is very critical concept, because in order for the organs to function properly, they need to work in a certain conditions. And these conditions need to be stable and not to change frequently and, of course, dramatically. Now, our body ability to maintain the stable internal environment is called homeostasis. So homeostasis is our body ability to maintain that internal environment very stable. So it provides a relative constancy of these conditions within our body, and that is very critical, because there are certain factors, like for example, water levels, ions, pH, temperature. All of these factors constantly changing, and if they reached a degree of change that we cannot, our organs and cells cannot tolerate, then they will stop working. Our body will stop working. So there is always a tendency to stop to stop these changes, and that is the negative feedback. That is the negative feedback. It's kind of counteracting the change, trying to stop it, trying to minimize it, trying to, not to induce it or stop it as early as detecting it in order to maintain that stable environment. Now, for the negative feedback, we have different factors that, not different factors, different components that they are forming that negative feedback control system. The first one is the controlled variable, second one is sensor, third one is the control center, and the fourth one is the effector. Now, on this image, we have the four components, and as you can see, they are running in one direction. Always the sensor to the control center to the effector, and no, sorry, I made a mistake. Well, not technically a mistake. I was, overlooking the controlled variables. I should have started from here. So these controlled variables. Now, these controlled variables are like, think of them any physical or chemical property that might vary and must be controlled to maintain the homeostasis. As we said, like the temperature, pH, anything that could change and negatively can affect the body is a controlled variable, and we need to control it, preventing it from going too high or preventing it from going too low. Now, if these changes are happening, they will be sensed by the sensor. The sensor is kind of receptors. These are monitoring the current value of controlled variable, and they will send the information to the control center. Now, the control center, for example, think of the brain, think of the pancreas for sugar, like different control centers, the spinal cord, for example, different control centers in our body. And these will receive the input from the sensors. They will compare the value, they will analyze it, they will check how far it is from the set point, and then they will signal a decision to the effectors. So they will send an order to these effectors. These effectors are going to take the action. They are going to produce an action to correct the change. Produce an action to correct the change. And it doesn't matter, like here, for example, with these two images, if it is coming too low or if it's coming too high, always the same sequence. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Always the same sequence. So let's see, for example, how does it happen with temperature. Temperature is a good example of a homeostasis and negative feedback. Now, to understand how our body works, think of your thermostat, your condition at home. You will set it to, for example, like in winter, maybe 72 degree, okay? And it will turn on and off depending on the changes within the room, the temperature of the room, to maintain that 72 degree, right? This is exactly how it's happening in our body. However, the temperature in our body to be stable is around 98.8 or 0.6. So that is the set point. Now, if the set point is, or if the temperature is too high, then the sensors in the skin and in the internal organs will sense these changes. That is number one. Then they will send to the control center, which is an area in the brain. It's called the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus will send to the effectors. And the effectors are, for example, one of them is the smooth muscles within the body vessels, within the blood vessels, So they will dilate the vessels in the skin to promote heat loss, and also it will send to the sweat glands to start sweating to promote heat loss. Both factors should return or bring back the temperature to the set point. So sensors sent to the control center sent to different effectors to set the temperature back. Let's see what happens if the temperature dropped. Again, these sensors in the skin will sense the change, will send it to the hypothalamus, then the hypothalamus will send to the effectors. Here it will send it to the blood vessels to stop sending blood toward the skin to save heat inside the body, and also it will send to the skeletal muscle to start shivering, because shivering is movement and that movement will generate the heat. Both factors should bring back the temperature to the set point. So this is how the negative feedback is working. As we said, it opposes the change. It's trying to prevent it. And that is very critical. 99% of our homeostatic regulations are negative feedbacks. This is the video that explains it, so please watch it. Now, we have another type of feedback which is called positive feedback, and positive feedbacks usually tend to amplify events. However, we have very limited examples of the positive feedback. It's just 1%. Now, like the process of childbirth, okay? And we can talk about this in the lab. I don't want to, to expand in about this in the video. So if you have questions, we can check it in the lab when we meet. But usually it would favor these changes. Okay, a change in the control variable causes a series of events that amplify the original change. It means that here it's going to amplify to favor this change and ask it for more. Now, this technically is not a mechanism to maintain homeostasis because they are not happening always. And usually that event is not a homeostatic event. So we are not talking about regulating temperature or ions concentrations and so on, rather about something temporary. Now, I like to say a funny example about the positive feedbacks. Think of it, for example, when you are eating chocolate. And after the first bite, you will say, this is so good, you will eat more. Okay? So this is a kind of a funny example, although not accurate, about the positive feedback, that you want to amplify that effect. So I will stop here, and the last part will be about our skin.